the former H-Rap Brown Imam Jamil Amin.
Shukran. Alhamdulillah. Shukran. You want to move the picture? أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك وتبارك اسمك وتعالى جدك ولا إله غيرك أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. I seek refuge in Allah from misleading and from being misled, from betraying and being betrayed into ignorance by others. I ask Allah to guide my heart and to guide my tongue. I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, and I bear witness that Muhammad is his servant and messenger. In speaking of the Prophet Muhammad, we are speaking of the Prophet Muhammad who lived 1400 years ago, who was an Arab by birth, unto whom Allah revealed the Quran, the book that Muslims follow. There is a chapter in the Quran, and it is the shortest chapter in Quran. It is 3 verses. And it says, the Arabic of which is, Wal Asri, Inna l-insana lafi khusri illa alladhina amanu wa amilu salihati wa tawassaw bil haqqi wa tawassaw bis sabr. The English translation renders this, by the token of time and through the ages, verily man is a loser, except those who are given to righteousness and who counsel each other to truth and who counsel each other to patience. It is in this context that I would like to approach the topic that has been given to me to speak on, and that all of the speakers have spoken on, concerning new visions for the upcoming decade. And in fact, when we look at it and we reflect, we find out that the vision of righteousness is not a new vision, but it is a vision in which Allah has implanted within man an aspiration that gives him the guidelines by which he may struggle or to be successful in struggle. The only thing that changes is time. There is a tradition of the Prophet, may Allah be pleased with him, that says that man abuses the vicissitudes of time, the changes of time, and Allah says, and he is time. So the whole thing that shows a lack of stability, of fluidity, is the fact that there will be different times, but the aspiration, the vision, the whole sense of what struggle is about will remain the same. And it is about trying to draw a nearness to your Creator, trying to draw in nearness to the Creator. Again, Allah says, He has created man and jinn but to worship Him. He has created the mankind and the jinn but to worship Him. Again, it is in this context that we begin to understand what the real struggle is about, what the sense of struggle is about, what our mission is about. And in this sense that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins to give us guidelines so that regardless of what time we may have been born in, what era we might find ourselves in, the guidelines will be the same as to what will bring about success, how we could be successful in this life. It is in this sense that we begin to look at what Allah has commanded upon us by giving us the book, which is Quran, and the example of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. Again, it is through these things that we have a sense of what is happening in the 1980s and what is happening in the 1990s. It is not something that is alien or strange, because the character of man is the same. The Prophet, peace and blessing be upon him, says, believe that a mountain moved before you believe man can change his character. That deals in the context of what is called the taqdir and qadar, in that when Allah created things, He measured for everything, and nothing can get outside of that in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has measured for him. So the character of man would be the same as when Allah created him and today. So as Allah has given us remedies, because He says of the Quran itself, it is a book in which there is a healing. It is a book in which there is a healing. It deals with every aspect of what we find ourselves confronted with. So in that sense, the application of the practice is that which brings about the cure, that which brings about the cure for the diseases that we find mankind plagued with today. And it is on the basis of these things that we have to begin to address ourselves. In the sense of where we find ourselves, one of the things that seemingly confuses man the most is the concept of peoplehood. What determines peoplehood? Again, Allah says in the Quran that He has created the races that men might get to know each other, not that they will despise each other. The best amongst you is he who is most righteous. The companions of the Prophet asked him, what is righteousness? He said, good behavior. So the best amongst men are those who have the best behavior. It is in this sense that we begin to look at in terms of what Allah commands upon us. The Prophet says that there are two things that will lead you to success. And he says these two things are taqwa Allah wal husnul khuluq. That is the fear of Allah, Allah consciousness, and good behavior. He said these are the things that will give you success. On the basis of these things, then peoplehood is determined by those who apply these rules the best, the practice, belief. Again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala points out that it is belief that determines peoplehood more so than any physiological characteristics, more so than race, more so than blood. And the narratives that He gives in the Quran substantiates this. He said Cain and Abel were blood brothers. One killed the other based upon belief. To be black is necessary, but it ain't sufficient. It's not sufficient. The prophet Abraham, whom Allah referred to as Hanif, or righteous, his father was an idol maker. Based upon the fact of belief, the family ties, the blood ties were broken. The prophet Noah, upon whom Allah sent the flood, the deluge, he prayed to Allah after the flood. He says, surely you're the most just of judges, because my son was drowned. Allah says, do not speak to me of that which you do not know. He said, he was not of you, he was of the unrighteous. He was not righteous. So even then, the blood ties are broken. It is in this sense that we begin to understand that peoplehood is determined by belief. And so in understanding this, we get a better perspective of what the battle is and who the enemy really is. If we see the enemy in terms of color, then we will be misled as to how to be effective in fighting. Everybody can fight, but everybody can't win. There's a way to fight. There's a way to win. And again, in viewing as to who the enemy is, those people are the people who we fight against, or those forces that we fight against, have never been blinded by racism. They've never been blinded by racism. When they fought Indians, they used Indians. When they fought the Mexicans, they used Mexican. When they fought Vietnamese, they used Vietnamese. When they fought the African Americans, they used African Americans, because they know if you're going to fight a green soldier, you need a green soldier. It is this concept. They have never been blinded by racism. So they give you racism as a tool by which you think that you may be organized so you can effectively combat them. And they know that the tool is inadequate for the struggle that you have to wage. The best amongst you is he who is most righteous. What is righteousness? Good behavior. Good behavior is learned behavior, just like bad behavior is learned behavior. So the models, the example of what good behavior is, the vision, the whole sense of what Allah says that man must aspire to, is best exemplified in the model of the prophets. All of the prophets who came from the prophet Adam to the prophet Muhammad, may Allah be pleased with them all, gave an exemplary model of conduct as to what man could achieve, what the vision really is about, regardless of what the time is. It is in this sense that we begin to understand how we begin to make preparations to fight. How it is necessary that we begin to deal with what is called the nafsi amaro, the evil of self. If you can't beat yourself, you can't beat nobody else. And this is what the crux of the Islamic program is about. It is dealing with the evil of self. Allah says, verily he will not change the condition of people until they change that which is in their hearts. Verily he will not change the condition of people until they change that which is in their hearts. And then he does not leave it at that. He gives them a program that will bring about the change, that effectuates change. And that program is built upon what is called the 5 pillars of Islam. The first being what is called kalima shahada, the declaration of faith, the bearing of witness to the unicity of one God, that there is no God but one God. He has no partners. He has no associates. He has no son. Allah say, far be it for him to have a son when he has no mate. He has no consort. For him to create is no more than to say be, and it is. He says the likeness of Jesus is that of Adam. He said be, and he was. The unicity, the Godhead being that there is one. This is a part of the purifying agency that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to man. And the other part of the formula is that Muhammad is his messenger, which is not a denial of the messengership and the prophethood of those who preceded him, but it is in fact a testimony and a statement that Allah has invested in him a program that will bring about the change that Allah says he will be pleased with. It is in this sense that the first pillar of Islam deals with the declaration of faith that there is no God but Allah. There is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his messenger. The second being prayer 5 times a day. The Prophet, peace and blessing be upon him, told his companions, if a man were to bathe himself in a stream 5 times a day, how much dirt would be left? They say of no significant amount. He said, that is likened unto prayer. He said, it is prayer that distinguishes belief from unbelief. It is prayer that distinguishes unbelief from belief. The Prophet, peace and blessing be upon him, says, know that everything on earth will rust. He says, but know that for everything that will rust, there's a tonic that will remove rust. And his companion asked him, said, will the heart rust? He said, know ye also that the heart will rust, but the tonic that removes rust from the heart is prayer. And so prayer is not an arbitrary thing. It has been commanded upon us to do 5 times a day at a prescribed time and in a prescribed manner. Because again, you're talking about bringing about the change. You're talking about being able to deal with the situations that you find yourself confronted with today. You're talking about addressing yourself directly to the drug problem. You're talking about addressing yourself directly to the immorality that exists in society today. These are the things that are bringing people down. It is self-oppression. It is voluntary slavery to your passions and to your appetite that holds you back. It is in this sense that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded upon us that we begin to practice the program in such a manner that it reflects and it amplifies the fear of the Creator, the fear of Allah. So the Prophet put great emphasis upon prayer. So much so that he said, if men would stay away from the morning and the night prayer, that if it were not for the women and children, he would order their houses to be burned. He never sought exemption from prayer. Even when he was fighting, Allah taught him how to pray. He didn't tell him he didn't have to pray. Because again, that was the line of communication between man and his Creator. That is his strength. That is how he develops the strength that is necessary. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins to allow that change to occur within his heart, he begins to understand the importance in terms of prayer, in the relationship to the battle, to the struggle that he constantly wages. For Allah says he has created man but to worship him. And verily, man has been created into toil and struggle. That it is a part and parcel of the development that you encounter in this life that you must struggle. So therefore, in this sense, the best struggle, the best way to be able to struggle deals with following the guidance. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us a book that deals with how to develop oneself. He says prayer. It is prayer that distinguishes belief from unbelief. It is not a small thing. It is a pillar in Islam. It is a thing that brings about the change that's necessary. So therefore, the vision that you talk about can be accomplished, can become a reality. Prayer as a pillar. Fasting. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that he has given us fasting. He has commanded fasting on us as he has commanded it on those before us, that we may learn self-restraint. And now is a time in which you begin to appreciate self-restraint. What is self-restraint? What does it have to do with being able to fight successfully? Again, the fast of a Muslim is that he abstains from food, water, and drink, and the lawful relationship that he has with his mate. The Prophet said concerning fasting, that know that there is a charity for everything, and the charity that you pay for your health is to fast. For the first time in the history of this country, the Surgeon General came out with a report that said that the Americans are digging their grave with their teeth. The greatest cause of disease is gluttony. Who says that you have to eat 3 meals a day to be healthy? It began to speak to the whole sense of being practical about governing what you take into yourselves. Again, fasting is a charity that you pay for your health. The whole sense of how the food chain has been poisoned relates directly to how we find ourselves, our perspective, how we understand and see things. Because in terms of the food, The food has been polluted and the food has been poisoned. For an example, we look at meat, something that everybody likes to deal with the whole concept of eating the meat because you think that it makes you healthy. But when you look at the meat that has been inoculated with certain antibiotics while it is living and have been given certain kinds of stimulants to the hormones to make it reproduce at a faster cycle or to make it grow in size, then you begin to understand the problems that you have in people who eat those meats. Because what is happening is that when the animal is killed, the preservatives and the additives and the hormones that have been introduced into the tissue does not just drop out and disappear. But when you cook it and you eat it, it goes into your system. So you see in terms of teenage pregnancy is directly related to the hormones that have been introduced into the cows and introduced into the pigs and introduced into the chickens to make their cycle move up. There was a case that happened in Puerto Rico a few years ago where they noticed that an 8-year-old girl had begun her menstrual cycle and had begun to develop bust. And they wondered why, what was happening, not only one girl, but a few girls. They wondered what was the situation. And someone says that it may be directed to what they're eating. And at that time, they were eating pigs or pork that had been brought in. So they took them off of it, and in a matter of months, they noticed a reversal of this whole thing, which shows in terms of that those hormones and things are still active and will be active when you introduce them into your body. This is why people are getting so big today. You see youngsters so big, they're eating at McDonald's and churches and Kentucky Fried Chicken, and they're blowing up. But not only does it affect you physically, but mentally. The mental concept of what is happening to the chemicals that come into the brain. And many of you might be familiar with the old story of what the mad scientist, what is called Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde syndromes. And this is what's happening in terms of people when they eat these certain chemicals, and their perspective is distorted, and what they think is real is not real. So much so that anyone with any understanding of age is in time understand that his story has ended unless you believe that his story continues. His story has ended. It is a time for truth. It is a time to address yourself on the basis of that which is right. Again, in terms of the foods that you eat and the diseases that they bring about. When you introduce a preservative into an animal, when it is killed, what is the concept of preserving? It is so that it will have a long shelf life, so it can be shipped from one end of the country to the other without showing any signs of deterioration. Whereas Allah has put within an animal or any meat that is killed, within 3 days it begins to undergo a process of deterioration whereby the senses are alerted that it is not palatable. It is not fit to eat because it begins to turn green and begins to smell. So the dude comes in and he shoots it with a preservative just like you do with a dead body. He shoots it full of formaldehyde so it won't spoil. And then a man come behind him with the color and shoot red dye number 3 in it so the eyes won't be deceived and it'll look red and fresh when you go into Kroger's. And so what happens when you eat these preservatives in your body? If the role of the preservative is to allow meat to last so that it won't be attacked by the bacteria and the digestive fluids to break it down, then what happens is you begin to accumulate a waste within your body. And the waste becomes toxic. And the cells and the things that surround this, that encompasses it, the cellular structure and those things that come to support in digestion, some of the cells become mutant. They become stronger than other cells. And they begin to devour the other cells. That's what cancer is. That's all cancer is. It's what you're eating. The water has become so polluted till one has to think in terms of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said concerning the plagues that were sent upon Pharaoh's house. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say he turned his rivers into blood. And blood is impalatable. You can't drink blood and derive any nourishment from it. And you look in terms of the rivers today, and you find out that all of the things that affected Pharaoh in terms of the plagues are visiting a society that has gone away, in which there is no remembrance of Allah. When there is no remembrance of the Creator, then man goes overboard and he begins to legislate for himself laws. And in legislating his laws for himself, then he becomes concerned about his offspring getting the benefit of the power that he had. So therefore, the whole sense of balance is thrown off. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the narratives and the examples in the time of Pharaoh and how he dealt with Pharaoh, saying he sent upon him plagues and locusts and frogs and the blood. And we look today and we see the same and the plagues in terms of the society today: AIDS, herpes, things that are directly related to an immoral kind of lifestyle. Allah says he will not change the condition of people until they change that which is in themselves. He will not change the condition of people until they change that which is in themselves. What does fasting have to do in terms of being able to enable us to survive the epidemic of plagues? In dealing with the food, fasting teaches us to abstain, to allow the body to cleanse itself. It teaches us the disciplines that are necessary to be able to survive a time when the balance has been thrown off. If a man got to eat 3 meals a day and he's chasing me, he's going to be in trouble because I can fast 30 days. It is in this sense, the physical aspect of being able to fast and the benefits of the fasting. Fasting that you may learn self-restraint, the spiritual aspect of it, that you may learn discipline, control. The prophet says, the strong man is not he who is a good wrestler, but he who can control his anger. So the strong man is not he who is a good wrestler, but it is he who can control his anger. How do you learn control over the emotions? How do you learn control over the anger? By disciplining yourself, by giving up those things that incite the anger. So in fasting, we are warned and we are taught, do not become angry. If you become angry and you're standing, then sit down. If you're seated, then lie down until the anger abates. Discipline and training. Because there will be a time in 1990 and the decades that comes whereby your lifestyle will be directly related as to how well you are able to deal with the problems that are out there, that exist. And there is guidance. There is a way to deal with it. There is a way to deal with AIDS. Because in Islam, there is no fornication, there is no adultery. These things are forbidden. Gambling is forbidden. These things are forbidden. So if we are serious about practicing the Islam, then we begin to discipline ourselves around these things, and in doing so, it exempts us from certain kinds of ailments that will affect the society, that will affect people who are around us. But again, everybody can fight, but everybody can't win. It's a price you pay to win. If a man's going to win in anything that he does, he practices. And this is what the Islam is about, practicing. The Prophet ﷺ, not only did he fast during the month of Ramadan, in which says 29 or 30 days of fasting, but he fasted the optional fast during the year. He would fast on Mondays and Thursdays. When we look into the Quran and we see in terms of the example of some other prophets, in their fasting, some of them would give up talking. They would give up talking. Why? As an example to us who might have problems with our tongues. Because the Prophet, peace and blessing be upon him, says the 2 things that lead to the hellfire. There are 2 things that will lead to the hellfire. And it is the 2 hollow things, the tongue or the mouth and the private parts. These are the things that lead to destruction. So to gain a control over these things, Allah gives us examples in the Quran. There were prophets, when they fasted, they gave up talking. The only thing they would say is, I am fasting. So what it does, it begins to discipline you around a certain level of cleanliness. It takes away from you obscenity, the cursing, which blackens the heart. These are the things that break down and undermine the household, because we don't have any control. We have learned bad behavior, and we have not learned or accepted the means by which we replace the bad behavior. That comes with practice. You don't just whoosh that off of you. You don't whoosh that off of you. All these years you've been exposed to it. You don't just wake up and whoosh it off of you. It's a practice that's necessary to begin to reverse that whole thing, to purge the heart of the desire to do things that is injurious to self. So therefore Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, this is the book, and it is guidance sure without doubt to those who fear Allah, who are steadfast in prayer, who believe in that which was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad and that which was revealed before his time, who give up the charity and in their hearts have an assurance of the hereafter. This is the book that will work for them. And again, it is on the basis of this practice that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows us to make the change that's necessary, even to be able to perceive what time it is, to know what's happening. Because most of us, our understanding of what's happening comes as a result of what we get in the newspaper and on TV. They tell you what they want you to think is happening. And you go out and say, this is what's happening. See, I don't believe nothing he say, but this is what's happening. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us fasting as a means of reaching another level to deal with ourselves. Fasting that you may learn self-restraint. And in terms of the other pillar of Islam that deals with charity, zakat. Zakat literally means to take from what you have to purify that which you keep. The whole concept of developing a social consciousness. When we look at the other pillars, they deal with dealing with self, and dealing with self in such a manner that we put ourselves in check and we begin to discipline ourselves around the strengths that we have. But then the whole sense of charity begins to push us into another era of wanting for our brother what we want for ourselves. The whole sense of being socially conscious. To be able to understand that whatever we have, the poor has a right in it. Whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us and entrusted us with, those people who do not have, they have a right in it. For Allah says, and zakat is for the poor and the needy and the wayfarer and the freeing of the captive and the recent convert, and for the keepers of zakat. So therefore Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins to broaden the whole concept of the social responsibility. Men are not benevolent by nature. It is a learned behavior that you become concerned for your brother. And again, the whole concept of brotherhood deals with those who believe as you believe. No race is monolithic. In every race you will find people who have varying degrees of belief, different beliefs. The superior amongst those people, Allah says, are those who believe in the unicity of Allah, the oneness of Allah. So therefore the concept of the brotherhood, the concept of what Islam promotes, deals with understanding that belief has a superiority over all of the physiological characteristics that men may have. The Prophet, peace and blessing be upon him, in speaking and addressing this situation, says that he who is not given to good deeds will not be hastened forth by genealogy. He who is not given to good deeds will not be hastened forth by genealogy. Don't make no difference who your daddy was, your grandfather was, your tribe was. So if you don't do good deeds, say you will not be hastened forth. You will not go forward. It doesn't make any difference what your bloodline is, because all come from two. He said all come from two. It is in this sense that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us a program. And this is what has been lacking amongst people. They have all kinds of slogans. They have all kinds of ideologies. But a program that deals with the necessary changes to bring about change. It is in this sense that men have come up short. A program. I have a dream is not a program. By any means necessary is not a program. That's not a program. You got, and it is criminal in 1989. You got people treating these things like they're programs. But they're not programs. What is the program that brings about the change? And again, this is what you have to address yourself to. This is what you have to be concerned about. For again, Allah says He will not change the condition of people. He will not change your environment until you change that which is in your heart, until you change your love for the environment. You know what the problem with drugs, man? You talk about drugs this and drugs that. Cocaine ain't the problem. It's the appetite that has been cultivated for those things that distort reality. It is that appetite that has been cultivated in this society, in this civilization, there is an appetite that has been cultivated to distort reality. Why? Because the prophet, peace and blessing be upon him, says, and this life, this world, is a prison for believers, say, but it is a paradise for unbelievers. So everything in this life, for those people who have no belief, is geared toward making them think that this life is the next life, is the hereafter. So after winning the Super Bowl, he said, I'm going to Disney World. Like Disney World is heaven. You hold the whole concept of drugs does the same thing. It gives that sense of distortion of reality, so he thinks that he is something else. And it runs the entire gamut, not only in terms of cocaine, but it goes all the way down in terms of alcohol. The law from Torah has forbidden the intoxicants and games of chance. So there's good and bad in them, but the bad outweighs the good. Even the dude who considers himself the social drinker, even in terms of those people who advocate it as a means of religious function, to say it is communion, so therefore the symbolism of drinking wine. You're distorting, you're messing with the mind. If it's unlawful, it's unlawful. If it intoxicates, the prophet says, if a lot of it intoxicates, then a little of it should be avoided. If a lot of it intoxicates, then a little of it should be avoided. But you're living in a society that has glorified intoxication, that has glorified it, and the athletes can no longer be champions against drug as long as they represent Miller beer and Coors beer. And the social programs that are introduced into the neighborhoods that we live in deals with the alcohol. So how you going to defeat drugs? And Coca-Cola says Coke is it. The real feeling. It's the real feeling. Coke is it. The subliminal seduction, because you ain't got no program to clean yourself with. No program that deals with cleansing the inner self. The prophet, peace and blessing upon him, says prayer is the key to paradise, and the key to prayer is cleanliness. The key to prayer is cleanliness. And the purification deals not only in terms of the physical self, but the spiritual aspect, which deals with the intention, what is called niyat in Islam. Everything proceeds from intention. If the intentions are clean, even if you don't fulfill the action, then Allah says you'll get the reward. Because that's the source, that's the spring. It is in this sense that we have to address ourselves to a program that deals with the social ills that we find ourselves confronted with today. What is your program? What program cures and deals with alcoholism, that deals with drug addiction? What deals with it? A program out there that deals with it. Islam deals with it. Because Allah says concerning, again, and we reflect back to the Banu Israel, the children of Moses, and their love for the calf, because what has been cultivated for intoxicants is a love. And dealing with it and looking at it in terms of what Allah says concerning the Banu Israel and their love for the calf. They had such an inordinate love for this idol, for this calf, till Allah said he made them drink of the iniquity of the calf into their hearts. They couldn't break away from it. And so it is with intoxicants in African Americans. Anything that you tell them and intoxicate them, they down with it. A few years ago, they said banana peelings will make you high, and you had dudes smoking banana peelings. And that ain't no joke. That's real. Anything that you tell them will intoxicate them, they will be down with it. And this is the whole sense in terms of when the man pushed forward the concept, he says that religion is an opiate. Because in some instances, religion is, because it deceives the people and intoxicates them. And it doesn't deal with the real problems that they have. It just intoxicates them. And they go out there in a state of being, in the sense of it being intoxicated, and they go home, and when they come down, they got the same problems, and they don't know how to deal with it. No, the change comes from within. Verily, Allah will not change the condition of people until they change that which is in themselves. It's an old vision. The time might be new, but the vision is the same. The program is the same. Islam is not an ideology. By definition, the word ideology or ideology by definition deals with visionary thinking or dreams. Islam is a methodology. Methodology deals with a program, deals with a method that if it is applied will bring about desired results. This is what Islam is about. And it requires practice. It's not enough just to know about it, but to practice it, to get up in the morning, to go to the mosque to make prayer, the Fajr prayer. It is a prayer that is binding upon the men. So much so that there was a blind man, Ibn Matun, who sought exemption from coming to the mosque in the morning. And he told the Prophet, he says that if I were to come out to make the prayer, he said I would have to go down a path and there might be scorpions and snakes and dangerous things. The Prophet said, do you hear the call to prayer? He said, yes. He said, then come to the mosque. It is binding upon those men because, again, in coming to prayer, the social process begins. For Allah says, and by those who range themselves in ranks and who could become therefore strong in repelling evil. By those who range themselves in ranks and you thereby become strong in repelling evil. You become a socially cohesive force. Because again, the whole sense of ignorance does not exist individually. Ignorance is an organized force and it has to be combated in that manner with a force of enlightenment. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you a practical program whereby men begin to come together on the basis of worshiping Allah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls us on the basis of that sense of sacrifice because again, zakat, charity, teaches us sacrifice. It teaches us to sacrifice. Then there's the pillar of Hajj, or the pilgrimage. And the pilgrimage is the symbolism of what happens on the Hajj is that there's an application of all of the other pillars, all of the other practices. One gets a chance to come together in the universal community of mankind, to worship and glorify Allah, and to see that how small the world is and that the absolute control and command that the Creator has over the world, because He sends out a call. And in this life, we got a choice as to whether we answer the call or not. But He's showing that in terms of His control is that on the basis of a call, even with a choice, there are those who respond to the call. And in the next life, when there is death upon us and we don't have a choice, He said that everything will respond. When you don't have a choice, He said, then everything is going to respond. So it is in this sense that Allah has given us a program, a method, whereby we can deal with those problems that we think are unsurmountable, that we think are gross problems and grave problems that are confronting man today. But they're not new problems. They're not new problems. All we got to do is go back a little bit, trace history, and you'll find out the history is a continuation in terms of from his civilization in Rome, Greece, Germany. Indeed, the ethics that rule this country are no more than the Greco-Roman, Judeo-Christian ethics that men have legislated for themselves in many instances. And you find out in terms of the remnants of Greece, the remnants of Rome, in terms of Germany, which was the Third Reich. And you begin to get an understanding of what's happening now. When you see what is happening now, you understand what happened in Germany and Italy, fascism. Earl Long, who was an astute politician in this society as far as their politicians go, was governor of Louisiana, was once asked, he says, will fascism come to America? He says, yes, fascism will come to America, but it will be called patriotism. The fascist symbol, called fasces, get your encyclopedias, used to be carried on the back of a silver dime, the United States silver dime. And that was minted for a long time. It was only recently taken out of circular about 10, 11 years ago. The symbol of fascism was carried on the dime. What does fascism deal with? When you look at it in terms of Mussolini, you look at it in terms of Hitler, and you have to begin to reflect in terms of recently, in the last 5 or 10 years, all of the programs on your arts and education, your public TV, have been geared around Hitler and his rise to power. Anytime you turn the channel, you'll be able to pick that up, Hitler and his rise to power, because they're teaching, they're instructing, they're conditioning people. And drugs have a part to play within this. And again, this deals with your accepting his definition of reality. You're accepting his definition as to what's going on. You see that in terms of there is a pyramiding of power. This is what the takeovers have been about. The corporations raiding other corporations. There is a pyramiding of power. And this is what the whole sense of fascism is about. Cooperation is a word itself that first became used in the fascist regime. And what it deals with, again, is the whole manifestation of a select group, of small groups or individual rising to a point where he has absolute control and authority. When you look at what is happening in terms of Europe, and when the brothers who are familiar with Quran, when you look at what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said concerning the Gog and the Magog and the wall, when the wall would crumble and they would sally forth from behind the wall was put there to restrain them. See, but there would come a time when the wall would crumble and they would sally forth from behind the wall. What has been put out here for the last 10 years is the concept of a united Europe with the same currency, using the same money. And so what you find out is that you cannot have a united Europe without a united Germany. So what you're finding is that the machinations, the process of what's going on, is that they're trying to arrange themselves in ranks so that from amongst them there will come a leader from amongst them.